This is Michael Bermudez, and I'm going to talk about correlation coefficients. The correlation between variables is an important concept in statistics. A correlation coefficient is a numerical index that reflects the relationship between two variables. The Pearson coefficient R can be used both as descriptive and inferential statistics. For our purposes right now, we are going to use R as inferential statistics. We're going to use that to predict outcomes. A direct or positive correlation happens when variables change in the same direction. So if a variable increases, the other variable also increases. The correlation coefficient value, or R, will range between 0 and positive 1. One example of this is the sit-to-stand assessment tool that I use in the geriatric setting. So I ask somebody, a client, to do sit-to-stand 5 times, and I record the time he or she takes to complete the test. So if there is an increased time to complete the test, then there might be an increased risk for falls or an increased incidence of falls. That is one example that I can use from my field. An indirect or negative correlation happens when variables change in opposite directions. If one variable decreases, then the other one increases. The correlation coefficient value will range from 0 to negative 1. One example of this, this is just an example. I don't have any studies to show, but if there is decreased engagement in exercise, there might be an increased blood pressure. So the higher the blood pressure, the lower frequency that one goes to engage in exercise during the week. That's just an example. So once we get the coefficient value R, we can see we can use that R to show the relationship between the variables. So if we get a 0.8 to 1.0 value, then there is a very strong correlation between those two variables. If you get 0.6 to 0.8, there is a strong relationship between those variables. And so on until 0 to 0.2, which indicates there's a weak or no relationship between the variables. So we can represent correlations using a graph. Scatter plots can be used to represent the correlative bivariate relationships. So we can use SPSS for a graph to make a graph that shows the relationship between the two variables. So we can use SPSS to obtain correlative relationships and coefficients. So this is an example of a graph that I made using the SPSS. So now I am going to proceed to using the SPSS. So let's proceed. I am going to use SPSS to calculate the Pearson's R, or the correlation coefficient. I am also going to demonstrate how to use SPSS to create a scatter plot graph that will illustrate the relationship between two variables. So I got this sample data set online, and this contains information, students' information, such as birthday, major, but I am more concerned with the English test scores and the writing test scores. I want to see what the relationship is between these two variables. Is the relationship a direct or positive correlation, or indirect or negative correlation? Is it going to be a weak or a strong relationship between those two variables? So next step is I am going to transfer the Excel data to SPSS. Let's hit on SPSS. And I already transferred the values from Excel to SPSS. But I'm going to show you step by step on how to transfer the values. I'm going to hit File, Import Data, Excel. Then I am going to type the name of the file and click on Open. Now that I have the values in SPSS, I'm going to use this application to calculate the Pearson SAR. So I hit on Analyze, click on Correlate, and since we have two variables, I'm going to click on Bivariate. Now we have all the variables here from the data set. I am going to click on English and then writing. Click on OK. And now you get the information. The N for English scores is 409, while the N for writing is 379. The Pearson's R is 0.367, which indicates a positive correlation between English scores and writing scores. However, this is a positive weak relationship. From the table we discussed before, this number will indicate that the relationship is weak. The number is 0.367. It's a positive weak relationship between the two variables. So we can use R to predict things. If we know the English test score, for example, we may be able to predict what the student's writing score is. But I think we can only do that if the relationship is strong. And right now we have a weak relationship between the two variables. Next, we are going to create a graph, a scatter plot graph. So I'm going to click on Graphs, and click on Chart Builder. Hit on OK. I am now going to click on Scatter dot slash dot right here. And I'm going to choose the graph with that line. Now we have all the variables here from the data set. I'm going to place the English variable here on the x-axis and the writing on the y-axis. Now I'm going to click on OK. And now we have the graph. This is a scatter plot graph that shows the relationship between the English scores and the writing scores. So this is a positive relationship and a weak one too. The value is 0.367. I hope you got to review how to use SPSS to calculate Pearson's R, and also how to use SPSS to create a scatter plot graph to show the relationship between two variables. Thank you for watching this presentation.